Hey, it's time for another episode of What Happened. And, well, let's just get it out of the way nice and early.
You don't win friends with salad.
Aurora Borealis.
France.
I am smart. No.
Nothing at all.
You just give him one of these.
Which was the style at the time?
Now, despite me saying I'm gonna get that out of my system, you can still expect way more references along the way, because it's time to answer the question, what happened to The Simpsons wrestling?
Homer.
Way back in the 1990s, it was all the rage for media empires to open video game publishing labels. Companies like Time Warner, Universal. One of the most interesting companies around that time was Fox Interactive.
Dad, that's Fox.
Undo! Oh.
They'd started to become pretty successful at leveraging their own brands. Die Hard, The X-Files, Alien vs. Predator, they all saw financially successful releases, in addition to original hits like Croc and his lovable Gobos. One franchise, however, stands above the rest. I'm talking about everyone's favorite nuclear family,
Nuclear. It's pronounced nuclear.
The Simpsons. Now, outside of perhaps the Konami brawler, Homer, Bart, Lisa, Marge,
And the rest.
hadn't really gotten any, for lack of a better term, good video games. And of course, there are a number of reasons for that. Despite the fond memories I'm sure some of you have of Tasmania and perhaps Jurassic Park, licensed titles were all over the place during the 8 and 16-bit eras. As technology progressed, the storage capacity of the mighty turgid CD-ROM was at least able to allow hours of voice speech, music, and animated cutscenes to be implemented directly into the games, which is a pretty good leg up if your IP happens to be based around characters known for their charming wit and/or intelligent banter.
So here they are. Oh, you guys with the beer. $5. Get out of here.
Fox Interactive first tossed The Simpsons into these new waters on two back-to-back PC titles, The Simpsons Cartoon Studio in 1996 and the more technically impressive The Simpsons Virtual Springfield in 1997. These weren't full-fledged games per se, but interactive experiences that showed how much of the show's charm could be crammed into a couple hundred megs. During all of this, Sony's PlayStation had quickly ascended to the top of the console mountain, and eventually Fox Interactive producers saw their chance to finally release a fully 3D Simpsons title that could authentically capture the spirit of Matt Groening's world in an interactive medium. I mean, without relying on turning purple things not purple or playing out exclusively within Krusty's Funhouse. So in May of 2000, Fox Interactive did just that, announcing they were bringing The Simpsons to PlayStations worldwide with the help of their American and European publishing partners, Activision, and Electronic Arts. But instead of announcing, say, a platformer or action game taking place in and around Springfield, they announced The Simpsons Wrestling, a straightforward polygonal slugfest taking place purely within the squared circle, a setting I'm sure some people were hesitant about.
Man, you'd never get me into a ring.
Simpsons Wrestling
Causes brain damage.
As for the team responsible for crafting all this grapple-based mayhem, well, that would be Big Ape Productions, which you'd be forgiven for not really remembering. Previous to The Simpsons Wrestling, their Congo-esque logo first appeared in front of Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace for the PlayStation and PC, but the team were also responsible for the better-received Herc's Adventures in 1997, a rambunctious, cartoonish take on Greek mythology that would later go on to inspire Supergiant's Hades.
Dramatization may not have happened.
Big Ape was co-founded by former LucasArts designer Michael Ebert, who had been looking to branch out with his own studio after working on a number of LucasArts properties, such as Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, Metal Warriors, and the 16-bit classic Zombie Flanders Ate My Neighbors.
He was a zombie?
So clearly, Big Ape did have the chops to pull off a full-fledged Simpsons video game. Experience working on the PlayStation, repeat success at making charming cartoonish action fare, and a track record of adapting franchises. I mean, really, what could go wrong? Turns out, quite a lot could go wrong. In a May 2000 press release issued by Fox Interactive, they announced that Simpsons Wrestling would body slam onto the PlayStation during the upcoming winter season, which it absolutely did not do. It instead arrived on March 23, 2001 in Europe, and a bit over a week later in North America, so yeah, obviously something happened to cause that 4-month delay, and that something is surely trouble.
That's good, because I want trouble.
Then we're agreed there'll be trouble.
Oh yeah, lots of trouble.
Trouble it is.
For you.
I spoke to Robert Leland, one of the Simpsons Wrestling's 2 senior programmers, who was willing to lay it all out for me, starting from the game's earliest days when it wasn't even a Simpsons game. The team's original pitch, spurred on by wrestling's white-hot popularity in the late 90s, started life as a celebrity wrestling game that eventually morphed into being Simpsons-related. Now, when you think about it, the Simpsons clan partaking in fisticuffs isn't even that far-fetched or out there as a concept. By the 2000s, the show had regularly dipped into the world of sports entertainment. What with Bret Hart and his old man Stink, Dr. Werner von Braun, and who could forget the Iron Yuppies Texas Deathmatch.
I hope they kill that Iron Yuppie.
Now, if you consider the game's release date, you might notice something odd. In 2001, both the Dreamcast and PS2 were on the market and doing their thing, so why exactly did The Simpsons Wrestling come out exclusively for the PS1 so late in its life then?
Nobody knows. It's a secret.
Actually, no, I do have a pretty straightforward answer. The game was limited to PS1 because it was the largest market. The PS2 was still pretty small, and the Dreamcast suffered a death of 1,000 cuts due to rampant piracy. Marketing also expected The Simpsons Wrestling to be a game played more by kids. Foolish thinking in my honest opinion, so the PS1 was preferred as the PS2 demographics skewed older. A little weird to think that a franchise that had been around for more than a decade and had dealt with issues like, gambling, firearm laws, prostitution, and killing hundreds of unarmed animals should be targeted at children, but, that's Fox executives for you. And while this is the first time we'll be hearing about their interference today, it certainly won't be the last, as they were apparently responsible for a lot of the decisions that hurt this project. While it's true that the PS1 did have a massive user base, the hardware could be tricky to navigate, and in this case, it gave the team lots of technical headaches. On Us, getting the outline rendering was an effort on the PS1. All the models were 3D, and the outlines are generated in real time, so graphically, it was challenged. It worked, mostly. Ah yes, the infamous black outlines. This semi-cel-shaded look was meant to better deliver on The Simpsons' visual identity, but it also had the unintended side effect of negatively impacting every facet of the gameplay. While at first glance it does seem to project a decent cartoon-like aesthetic, eventually your eyes start to adjust to reality. As Robert mentioned, these outlines were rendered in real time and were pretty taxing on the PS1, which resulted in a somewhat wobbly graphical look and also made for an inconsistent frame rate. The game is far from unplayable, but Big Ape staff were actually aware of this and even included a code to disable the outlines altogether, which actually improved the game's performance, resulting in smoother and faster gameplay.
Oh yeah, speed holes.
This seemed to be an issue that the team were always struggling with, trying to match the show's look as much as the aging hardware would allow, but that wasn't the only problem, not by a long shot. You'd think working directly with the writers who had popularized The Simpsons throughout the 90s, as well as the voice actors, would surely result in the best performance of their life.
The best performance of your life? The best performance of my life.
And would only be a good thing for the end product, but it unfortunately resulted in miscommunications, delays, and reams of cut content.
No. No.
Robert Leland told me that when the Simpsons writers and voice cast were told they needed to provide material for a wrestling game, they perhaps didn't get the full memo, and sent back a ton of voice files that, well, let's just hear it from him. The writing and dialogue lines supplied by the Simpsons team were often really inappropriate for video games. Actually, they were probably inappropriate for TV too. We don't know why we were getting such difficult writing, and a lot got bounced by legal, marketing, and us, just outright rejecting some lines that were offensive. There was a lot of back and forth to get the dialogue done. This was a revelation also shared by Michael Ebert himself on his personal website, where he went down a list of do's, don'ts, and whatnots of the project. The statement in question is incredibly blunt. Expect any dialogue the Simpsons writers give you to be too graphic and offensive for games. Michael's list of dirty details goes on, revealing that at one point the team had made a much more dynamic character select screen, which you can see here, and honestly it really reminds me of the one featured in WCW Super Brawl.
I'm bad! You want Vader?
Michael explained, no matter how cool a feature is, expect some executive somewhere to ask you to remove it. We had an interactive character select screen where the Simpsons characters would reach across the select screen to punch and trash talk each other. We had to remove that and replace it with non-talking static 2D images. Duh, I mean, come on, dude, it can't be that bad, can it?
Oh.
The cuts didn't stop there, because, as we all know,
Okay, it's time for the easiest part of any coach's job. The cuts.
turns out Big Ape had to also cut several school-themed stages, which, according to Michael, was to avoid any potential association with the Columbine massacre. Ebert's statement is vague and doesn't specifically point the finger in any direction, but I personally can't help but wonder if that order came down from the team at Fox. I mean, I'm pretty sure the TV series also shied away from depicting any intense scenes that occurred on school grounds around the same time period.
We want out! We want out!
Fox continued their reign of terror with Michael's next tantalizing tidbit. Be sure the licensee is aware of the violence level of the game. It's really hard after the game is at alpha to go back and make it so some characters cannot attack others. I unfortunately wasn't able to get in touch with Michael in time for this video, but it's wild to imagine how out of touch with your own product you have to be to think the level of cartoon violence is an issue for The Simpsons. Now, this is more on the speculative side of things, but I think it is odd that Maggie is the only core family member that's not a playable character. So it's easy for me to envision a time where Maggie was at one point playable, but there was some concern that Krusty annihilating her with his hammer wasn't a good look, and so she was reworked into the game in another way. The most succulent morsel, however, that came from Michael's site was the following. Working with licensed properties and approvals can be extremely difficult if your producer is inexperienced and then quits mid-project. Now, we also don't know who he's referring to here, as staff are sometimes credited and sometimes not when they leave a project, but this must have been a nightmare for the team. A changing of the guard can often bring with it wildly different opinions and mandates, especially if it was on the Fox Interactive side. Typically, for a game's development to be successful, the team behind it has to be a family. A happy family.
So that's it after 20 years. So long, good luck.
All of these issues likely contributed to the 4-month delay I mentioned earlier, but there's still one big elephant left in the room. And that was the actual gameplay. Despite being called The Simpsons Wrestling, there's very little, i.e. zero, wrestling to be had. It's more of a really bad Power Stone. The characters run and jump around the ring with their tiny 3-move movesets, and that's pretty much it. You can't jump off the top rope, you can't perform a suplex, submission, or even climb a ladder to become Emperor Clobbersaurus.
Oh, hail Emperor Clobbersaurus!
coupled with the lack of modes, the sometimes dodgy frame rate, and the threadbare content is what resulted in The Simpsons Wrestling becoming the worst rated Simpsons video game of all time, and probably the worst game released in 2001 in general. A 30 from GamePro, another 30 from The Authority, that was Maxim Magazine, an astonishing 1 out of 10 from IGN, and not 1, but 2 zeros.
Oh no.
I asked Robert Leland if he felt that this reputation was justified, to which he responded,
Yes. Yes, it is.
No, I'm just kidding. I couldn't resist. What he actually said was a bit more nuanced. Yes and no, it was PS1 and was compared against PS2 products, which isn't fair. But I will say, Big Ape as a team really didn't get fighting games. We aimed for humor, not precision, so there are lots of jokes, but the game is not as competitive as other fighter games. Again, this was development targeted to a younger audience, not dumbed down as such, but not overly sophisticated. So humor and ease of play rather than exact timing and sequenced combos. Reviewers didn't see this. Partially, that is also on marketing. Sometimes you are subject to some weird decisions, and ultimately it's going to cost, and not many of us were happy with the result. Success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan.
They do have a mother, champ.
Yes, but I would imagine that she would die of grief.
So it's not all that surprising when you consider that in addition to everything else, The Simpsons Wrestling also had a very aggressive time frame in which to get made. Robert Leland estimated that full production only lasted 1 year, which any developer would agree is far too brief. Regardless, aiming for the console with the biggest user base did seem to pay off though, as The Simpsons Wrestling sold somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 copies in just the UK alone, according to the Gold Sales Award it earned from the ELSPA. In the US, numbers are even less available, with only a brief mention in Activision's quarterly report for the period ending June 30th, 2001. Here, it's explained that they released 14 products within the quarter, and cite 6 specific games in a list of titles that sold very well in the marketplace, which includes The Simpsons Wrestling. This is kind of a nothing burger, but also kind of a, well, I guess it did decently to get on this list.
I don't have your money here. It's in Bill's house and Fred's house.
Hey, what the hell you doing with my money in your house, Fred?
This relative success, unfortunately, did not result in success for Big Ape Productions. Activision dropped out of their Simpsons publishing deal immediately after the wrestling hit the ring, with EA picking up the worldwide rights for Simpsons Skateboarding, Road Rage, before briefly dipping out to allow Vivendi to publish Hit and Run, before picking right back up where they left off with the Simpsons game, which then kind of somehow morphed into Dante's Inferno, which is weird, I know, but just check out this video here for the lowdown on that. Big Ape then teamed up with Gotham Games to revisit the concept that started it all, resulting in the well-regarded, citation needed, Celebrity Deathmatch.
Johnny, those are the biggest balls I've ever seen.
Not really an improvement, and without the Simpsons license, you could make the airtight argument that this was way, way worse.
I said, are you ready to laugh?
Quiet, you awful man!
After the Celebrity Kumite flopped at retail, Big Ape Productions essentially closed their doors, but fortunately many of the staff, including Michael Ebert, found a home at Toys for Bob, and in Robert Leland's case, returned to Toys for Bob, where he had originally designed the Star Control series in the early 90s. They then all transitioned onto Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure, Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam, and eventually the Skylanders series. There's been a lot, and I mean a lot of videos over the years dumping on The Simpsons Wrestling, criticizing its graphics, gameplay, its lack of wrestling, and pretty much everything else. After actually researching it, however, it seems that there was plenty that Big Ape Productions, a studio with a fair track record up to that point, had to deal with that was out of their control. They had to ship a game on a far too strict timeline while grappling with aging hardware and meddling Fox staff who seemed to be a bit too trigger happy in scrapping their work. It really puts things into perspective. I mean, sure, the concept of this show, what happened, might offend a few of the YouTube blue noses with its developer interviews and musky deep dives. Oh, it's never going to be the darling of the so-called trending on gaming tab who clucks their tongue, strokes their beard, and talks about what's to be done with this McMuscles. So thanks again to Robert Leland for answering all of my questions. And if you know of any other misunderstood and mismanaged misfires in the video game or movie industries, let me know in the comments below or use the power of the internet to drop me a line over on my Twitter.
The internet? Is that thing still around?
Smell you later, and thanks for watching!